When my son asked me about his father while crying once again, I pointed at the television. Samuel Shaw, who had just made it into the top 3 of the wealth rankings, was being interviewed. He said he had achieved fame and success, and the person he hated most was his childhood sweetheart and ex-wife. She abandoned me when I was gravely ill, all for the sake of money. But it was that very betrayal that pushed me to rise from the ashes in my darkest hour. The reporters grew excited and suggested contacting me on the spot. She must be filled with regret, begging Mr. Shaw to take her back. My phone rang right then. I answered and immediately asked for money. Samuel, my son is sick. Could you lend me $60,000? He abruptly hung up the phone and said with a cold laugh, knowing she's living so miserably gives me peace of mind. Looking at the kidney failure report in my hand, I silently wept. 6 years ago, I secretly donated one of my kidneys to Samuel. Now, his son was suffering from the same disease and didn't have much time left. I turned off the TV and coaxed my son to sleep. Tomorrow was the day of his checkup. It was also his birthday. After leaving the hospital, I took him to the mall to pick out a gift. A commotion erupted not far away. Samuel Shaw, dressed in a tailored suit, was surrounded by people. After 6 years, he had shed the youthful naivety of his student days. Now, he was handsome, composed, and exuded an intimidating presence. I froze, suddenly remembering that this mall belonged to him. My son's eyes landed on a Superman figure priced at $20. He quickly put it back. Mom, I don't really like it. Let's just go home. I looked at my sensible little boy. A pang of sadness gripped my heart. It wasn't that he didn't like toys. He just thought it was too expensive. I reached out to ruffle his hair, about to say, let's buy it, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Daddy, it's Daddy. I hadn't expected that just a casual mention last night would leave such a deep impression on him. Samuel's gaze immediately swept in our direction. The moment he saw me, his eyes widened sharply. Before I could react, my son dashed toward him, wrapping his small arms around Samuel's leg. Samuel looked down with cold, sharp eyes, his brows furrowing tightly. But when he noticed how much my son's features resembled mine, his expression shifted. For a moment, there was a flicker of something else, something almost wistful. That rare trace of softness was abruptly interrupted by a delicate, honeyed voice. Sam. Becky Fisher approached gracefully in a nude-colored gown, her smile coy and playful. I forgot my black card. I was afraid they'd think I'd skip out on the bill, so I rushed over to find you. The store manager, arms full of luxury shopping bags, spoke in an ingratiating tone. Miss Fisher, you must be joking. You only spent $30,000 today. That's not even as much as the watch Mr. Shaw gifted you last time. She pressed her lips into a smile and intimately linked her arm through Samuel's. And this must be your ex-wife? Saying that, she turned to my son with a beaming expression. What an adorable little boy. He looks about 5, doesn't he? Because of his health condition, my son had always been smaller than other kids his age. The moment those words left her lips, Samuel's expression turned ice cold. Without warning, he kicked my son away, then dusted off his pants in disgust as if he had been tainted by something filthy. My son crashed to the ground, his small face instantly going pale, his lips tinged with blue. Loretta Lee, you sure didn't waste any time. As soon as you dumped me, you already got together with another man? I didn't have time to care about his mockery and rushed over to lift my son, my heart aching. Becky glanced around and casually asked where the boy's father was. Tears welled up in my son's eyes as he pouted and pointed at Samuel. Mommy said, you're my daddy. A sharp pain clenched my heart, followed by a wave of regret. The first time my son cried and asked for his father was when the neighbor's child called him an illegitimate child. Every year on his birthday, his only wish was for his father to suddenly appear. That was why, last night, I acted on impulse. When Samuel heard my son's words, a deep sneer flashed across his face. You'd even lie to your own son for money? I never thought you'd become this shameless and disgusting. Pain and fury surfaced in his eyes, perhaps due to the memories rushing back. His emotions spiraled out of control as he grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward him, nearly pulling me into his arms. All that love, all that kindness toward me, was it all just an act to fool me? The familiar scent on him hit me, and for a moment, my mind drifted back to the past. We were neighbors since childhood. When we were 15, a car accident took both our parents' lives. From that day on, I learned to cook for two, and his bicycle's back seat always had a place for me. We clung to each other and fell deeply in love. At 18, after the SATs, he confessed to me with a flushed face. At 22, right after graduation, he got down on one knee and proposed. That year, Samuel's newly developed product had just caught the attention of investors. Loretta, as my wife, I'll make sure you have everything and that you'll be the happiest woman alive. But a single diagnosis of acute kidney failure shattered our beautiful future, dragging us straight into miserable life. No matching donor could be found, and the staggering medical bills became a death sentence hanging over us. At my most desperate, I worked 3 jobs a day, sleeping only 3 hours a night. At my lowest, I even tried selling my blood, only to collapse mid-donation. After running tests, the doctor gave me 2 pieces of news. First, my kidney was a perfect match for Samuel. Second, I was over 3 months pregnant. A sickly sweet wave of perfume snapped me back to reality. Becky clung to Samuel's arm, her tone coy and delicate. Sam, don't be mad. It's all in the past. Her mocking gaze swept over my son and me, lingering on our worn-out clothes, her pity barely concealed. She looks pretty miserable now. Left you to find a rich man, only to fail again. She swayed Samuel's arm playfully. Sam, why don't we help her out? It's just $60,000, not even the price of one of my bags. She sighed dramatically. I just can't stand seeing a child so pitiful. Not only is he illegitimate, but he can't even afford a cheap toy. Though she sounded like she was pleading on my behalf, every word was a reminder to Samuel that I had left him for money, moved on without hesitation, and had another man's child. The flicker of resentment and hesitation in Samuel's eyes was instantly replaced by cold indifference. He let go of me and shoved me away hard. Then, with a gentleness that felt like a mockery, he pulled Becky into his arms. You're just too soft-hearted and kind. A woman this scheming and ruthless doesn't deserve an ounce of sympathy. Samuel curled his lips, as if mocking himself or maybe me. What's the point of treating her well? In the end, she'll just toss you aside like you never mattered. I staggered, barely keeping my balance. The medical report in my hand slipped to the ground. Becky picked it up, glanced at it, then gasped in exaggerated shock. Kidney failure? Samuel's expression darkened in an instant as he snatched the report from her hands. Becky turned to me, feigning surprise. Loretta, you really went all out. Carrying around a medical report while shopping and even coaching your son to block the way and call Sam daddy. Whatever trace of doubt or concern had flickered in Samuel's eyes slowly faded with those words. Without hesitation, he flung the report at me, the papers scattering all over. 6 years apart, and your tricks have only gotten more disgusting. Your child is so unlucky to have a shameless mother like you. My son couldn't hold back anymore. He burst into tears and lunged forward, fists clenched, trying to hit Samuel. You're a big meanie. A horrible person. Mommy is the best. You're not allowed to talk about her like that. I rushed to pull him back, but I was a second too late. Becky's eyes flashed, and in the next instant, she bent down and slapped him hard. The force sent him stumbling into my arms. His fair little cheek swelled up instantly, a red mark spreading across his soft skin. His lips split at the corner, blood seeping out. Rage consumed me. I lost all reason, shot to my feet, and swung my hand at Becky. But before I could land the slap, Samuel caught my wrist in a crushing grip. He squeezed so hard that pain shot through my bones, an audible crack echoing in the air. Becky seized the moment, shrinking against Samuel's shoulder, her body trembling as if she had just been terrified. I'm sorry, Sam, she whimpered. I thought her son went crazy. I panicked and just reacted. It's all my fault. If you want, you can let Loretta slap me back. Samuel glared at me, fury burning in his eyes. A fatherless brat with only a mother to raise him, yet Becky is still kind enough to pity you. He sneered, insisting that I must have taught my son to stage this whole scene. Getting hit was just an excuse to extort money. Loretta Lee, isn't $60,000 what you wanted? Apologize to Becky right now, and I'll lend it to you. The fire inside me instantly died the moment he mentioned money. I lowered my head, swallowing the bitterness and pain that threatened to spill over. For my son, I had no choice but to bow my head. I'm sorry. I forced the words out to Becky, my tears falling onto my shoes. Only my son noticed. He stretched his little arms as far as he could, wiping my face with his small hands. But Samuel never kept his promise. Instead, he chuckled lowly, a cruel satisfaction lacing his voice. I was just playing with you. You should get a taste of the darkness and despair I once went through. I bit my lip hard, my eyes filled with agony, but he only scoffed. If things are so bad, why don't you just toss this burden aside like you did me? Maybe this little thing will get lucky, just like I did, and find a miracle. With that, Samuel took Becky's hand and walked away without a second glance. I collapsed onto the ground, numbly gathering the scattered medical report. He still had no idea. The miracle he believed in was the kidney I gave him. I still remember that day when I rushed home, eager to tell Samuel the good news about my kidney being a match. As for the ultrasound confirming my pregnancy, I had already torn it to pieces and tossed it in the trash. For the man I loved, I had made my choice. I would secretly terminate the pregnancy and proceed with the transplant surgery. But the moment I stepped through the door, what awaited me was Samuel lying in a pool of blood. A handwritten suicide note sat on the table. He wrote that he couldn't bear to watch the girl he loved wither away. He refused to drag me into debt just to prolong his suffering and ruin my chances to have a good life. He mentioned because he loved me more than he loved himself, he chose to end it, slitting his wrists so that both of us could be freed from this misery. Samuel's condition was severe. Even with a transplant, the doctors warned there was no guarantee he'd fully recover, and having children in the future would be nearly impossible. This was his way of protecting me. It was his final, desperate choice. I sobbed as I rushed him to the emergency room. When he finally woke up, I slapped him across the face. Samuel Shaw, I've been wanting to divorce you for a long time. You really think I'm that stupid? That I'd willingly spend my life suffering with you? Don't you dare use suicide to guilt trip me. I'm not falling for it. I lied. I told him I was working at a bar and already hooked up with a rich heir. I would never forget the look on his face, shattered, hollow. It was the second time I ever saw Samuel cry. The first was at his parents' funeral. He signed the divorce papers and told me I was free. It wasn't until I left the hospital and got into a cab that I finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. If I hadn't done it this way, Samuel would have never accepted my kidney. So, I hid away and gave birth to my son. My body had barely recovered before I was back on the operating table. Just before death could take him, I saved Samuel.